My name is Cindy Jackson. Oh. My name is Cindy Jackson, and we're here to talk to you a little bit today about our cooperative development in Mount Pulaski called FarmFED Co-op. And it's basically a way that we are creating food sovereignty in Illinois. So just some brief introductions. I'll let Jeff introduce himself, and then I will tell you a little bit about myself.
Pasar el micrófono a Jeff para que se presenta.
Hi all, I'm
Hola
Jeff
a
Hake.
todos, mi nombre es...
Should I go? I guess
Okay,
I'll
I
go
think
ahead.
you should be able to, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, so sorry.
It's okay. I'm Jeff Hake. I'm the vice president of the board for FarmFED Cooperative. Cindy, are we just doing our personal introductions now, and then we'll get into the slides? Cool. So I'm trying to remember what Cindy put on the slide on my behalf. I'm not from Illinois, actually. I'm from Massachusetts originally. I grew up not in an agricultural area, not on a farm, not any of those things. But I've always been attracted to it, and now I find myself in Central Illinois. I live down in McLean, which is just south of Bloomington Normal. It's a very small village of about 800 people. And what else to say about myself? I have my own farm with my brother-in-law and my wife, Fungus Grove Heritage Fruits and Grains, and we also are part of the operation of Fungus Grove Pure Maple Syrup. Brief background is I've done a lot of farming and gardening work since I was in high school, and been involved in that my whole life, my whole career at least. And I'm a graduate of the Friedman School at Tufts, where I specialize in agricultural practice and education.
Fantastic. My name is Cindy Jackson, and my background, I'm from Decatur, Illinois, and I started off going to get my sustainable agriculture and horticulture degrees, and then I ended up starting an urban gardening program in Decatur, Illinois at the Good Samaritan Inn, which is the local soup kitchen in Decatur. And as I kind of went through that, seeing all of the different food insecurities and the access issues that happen in urban areas and rural areas, really ignited kind of a passion for me for, everybody should have access to fresh, local, healthily produced foods and culturally appropriate. And that just doesn't tend to be the case, unfortunately. So it really just ignited this whole spark of how we can make sure that everybody has those basic human needs met, as far as I'm concerned. So it's kind of where it all started. And then I was hired at FarmFED by Jeff and the interim board in October of 2021. And we have been chugging along ever since. And it's been a really exciting development and adventure. There have been some challenges along the way, which is, we're not going to sugarcoat a whole lot for you today. I'm just kind of tell you the issues that we ran into and ask for your help in trying to solve them too. I just want to start off really by saying thank you for all of you being here and bringing all of your expertise to the table and being able to maybe share some ideas of, different routes that we can take and help us as we chug down the trail to getting this food co-op open. As I stated, right now, we're just a development, so we're not in operational status quite yet, but we really are hoping to be that way either by the end of this year or the beginning early of next year. So we are getting there. It's just been a process, as most things are.
Well said.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm just going to start off with a very brief, I'm sure most of you know what food sovereignty is, but this was about the most thorough explanation I could find for it. And food sovereignty is the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agricultural systems. It puts the aspirations and needs of those who produce, distribute, and consume food at the heart of food systems and policies rather than the demands of markets and corporations. To me, whenever I read through this, knowing what I know about co-ops, those two definitions really come together well and really mesh together very nicely. So I feel like what these co-ops, all of the food co-ops that you see throughout the state, and I know Chicago has a plethora of amazing co-ops. I've been lucky to visit just a handful of them, but they were just fantastic and I got lost in them. So I'm sure that you understand that those two ideas are very much intertwined, and there is a way to achieve food sovereignty, but we have to work together as communities and kind of stand firm and stand strong in making it happen. So achieving food sovereignty, obviously there's no easy one line answer for this. It's something that just takes everybody's input and everybody at the table being heard and being willing to speak and talk about how food is safe, healthy food is a human right. It's not something that should be optional. It's something that everybody should have access to. And, whenever you really drill down into it, the land use situation that we face, not only in our state, but just I think nationwide right now, and helping farmers to make sure that they've got everything that they need to be successful and feed our country and feed our communities is really vital to making that an achievable method. So co-op models, local food cooperative models can help with these goals by allowing people to be a part of the change. So what I find most intriguing about co-ops is that the people that are directly in your area are able to contribute and buy in and really have a voice, not only with their voice, but with their dollars as to how food is moved and how food is consumed and produced in their area and in their lives. And that's such a great way to work towards food sovereignty in my mind. It helps us figure out a way to break away from that big commercial machine that's been put into place as far as food systems go over the past 50 or 60 years or however long it's been. And, these stores are independently owned by the people in the community they serve. And to me, that's just a magical thing and something that we in Illinois, downstate especially, need to get a little bit more familiar with and need to make a little bit more normalized. Because there aren't a lot in downstate Illinois and in the rural areas of Illinois. We don't see enough of the fresh food co-ops, grocery stores, or anything like what our model is proposing. So we're very unique in that way, and we're hoping that we can serve as some sort of a model moving forward for a cooperative processing facility for other areas of the state, as well as hopefully other states and other areas, as in addition.
Cindy, can I chime in?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so when Cindy and I met before this to talk this morning over like what we're trying to get at, we're talking about food sovereignty and cooperative models. And I feel like food sovereignty is a tricky thing because when a person or a group of people or a community says that they are food sovereign, it's sort of a declaration that you might have food, there is food around, but the actual any kind of input on what kind of food you have available to you, any power in that system isn't actually available to you at all. So when we're talking about food sovereignty, it's a matter of control and choice and local input and people having a voice in it. I just feel like it's important to distinguish, like there is food here, but as far as an actual regional food system, something that functions by and for the people that live here, it's essentially completely absent. So when we're talking about a cooperative model, we're talking about having access to power in that food system and having literal buy-in and investment from community members. That's how these two things tie together. So I just wanted to put a pin on that. Like when we're talking about a cooperative model, that's a community coming together to start to wrestle back all the economic and political inequities that we're facing.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, because food sovereignty, obviously, whenever I started to do my research on what it actually was, it was really intriguing to me how many different components and areas it incorporates into it. But yes, what Jeff was saying, that's kind of what we're focusing on in the cooperative movement, is allowing communities to say what they have and to help drive this economic force, which is food. So the mission of FarmFED Enterprise Development Cooperative, or Farm Fresh Enterprise Development Cooperative, and our acronym for that is FarmFED Co-op, is to connect Central Illinois consumers and producers for their mutual benefit by cooperatively expanding processing infrastructure and market access for local farmers and other producers, and by providing our community with year-round access to locally produced fresh and nutritious food. And, this has started off, we wanted to kind of think about hyper local, but as we really dug into our business plan, into the needs of our community and of our state, we realized this is going to be a very, very regional, probably statewide kind of effort that needs to happen. And so it was really exciting to see that expansion and see our focus move from this little bit to this really big area. And I think that it's something that is absolutely beyond needed. And a lot of people say, what's Mount Pulaski? Where's Mount Pulaski? It is a very small town in downstate rural Illinois. There's only a population of about 1,500, and it is in the middle of bean fields and windmills. So we are really lucky down here that we have a lot of flat area, and I'll get into it a little bit later in the introduction as to how those windmills actually helped us and Mount Pulaski form these two co-ops. They came in and were very community minded, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But centrally located, we have access to a lot of main highways and interstates for food movement and food distribution. And the supportive community in Mount Pulaski that embrace the cooperative model is just absolutely breathtaking to me. These people really do understand how important it is to have a say in where their food comes from, how it's produced, whom it's produced by, and how they are able to obtain it. So our shareholder base has been extremely engaged. And I do have to say, being in Mount Pulaski, we have got shareholders in Texas, California. Thanks to Jeff, we have a lot in the northeastern part of America, in Maine and Massachusetts. So his family was very supportive of the idea. And so it's really cool to see. I didn't put it on this PowerPoint, and I wish I would have, but it's cool to see all of those little dots all over America that have really shown interest and want to see what happens with this development. And I'm sure how they can apply it to their own specific areas. So just to give you a little bit of history of how FarmFED was born, it was in 2017. There was an EPA grant that Mount Pulaski that was in 2019 that Mount Pulaski obtained, called the Local Food, Local Places Grant. And that brought up together, I believe it started off as 20 to 25 people in a room. They had lost their grocery store in Mount Pulaski, and just to give you a little bit of reference, for them to get to a grocery store from Mount Pulaski, it's a 20 to 25 minute rural drive to go. They only really have two options, and Decatur or Lincoln, to be able to get food. So whenever the corner grocery store closed, it really put them in a big predicament, and they were concerned about how they were sitting in the middle of farm country and didn't have any access to edible food and fresh food. So in 2017, they kind of, got together and started talking about the ideas of cooperatives, and then applied. The EDPB in Mount Pulaski is extremely active. And this is where Enel comes in, which is the wind farm that operates in Mount Pulaski. When Enel came to town and wanted to start putting their windmills up, they met with the city council and the EDPB and just regular citizens of Mount Pulaski and asked them how they could be a part of the community. They really wanted to come in and provide some funding, resources, and some ways to, plug into the community that they were putting their windmills up in. And so the relationship was established early, and it was very fruitful for both. They actually fund the EDPB yearly with a yearly amount to be able to give money to all of the local places, that local organizations or even businesses that need a little help. If they need building repair, any of those things that maybe are just a little out of their reach, they now have this really awesome resource to go to, and that will help them. So the EDPB went and applied for the 2019 loan, and the EPA granted that. And they just, Jeff, I think I'll let you kind of take over on this, because I know you were a part of that initial conversation and I was not. So I don't want to speak on something I wasn't there for.
Yeah, I'm already unmuted. Yes, this is the point at which I got involved in this project. I had friends who lived in Mount Pulaski, and this whole project was just starting to really foment. And so the EDPB in Mount Pulaski applied for this local food, local places grant. And what that is it basically, it doesn't fund, it's not like a normal grant. What it does is it funds a community planning process in which officials from the EPA work with local government officials and other concerned citizens to talk about how creating a more local food system can change a place. And that they do this grant program all over the country in urban places and rural places alike. And Mount Pulaski was lucky enough to get one of these grants. And I've told this story a few times, but it still gets me kind of teared up. Oh, sorry. What does EDPB stand for? Oh boy, no, I gotta remember. Economic Development,
there you go.
Economic Development and Planning Board.
There you go.
A lot of towns, big and small, have EDPBs or some variation on the acronym. You know, an entity that helps direct local funding to revitalize or, you know, bring in tourism or establish a tax base to fund projects, that kind of thing. And the like Cindy was saying, the EDPB in Mount Pulaski has been very proactive, very supportive of our work, and we've remained very appreciative of that. So when EPA initiated this community planning process, they kind of do it in stages. And the part that I got involved in is that they had, they did a community meeting at the American Legion Hall down in Mount Pulaski. And I've been involved in a lot of like community organizing things and like local political things for a lot of my life. And I went to this meeting and I have never seen so many people so excited about one same thing from a community. That everyone was excited about the idea of bringing a grocery store back and of trying to treat food as an economic driver in a small town. I left that meeting so excited because everyone there was so excited. I've never seen so much consensus at any meeting of that many people. And it was a really thrilling thing to think like maybe this is the place where this kind of project can take root. And so far it has. Does that kind of cover us?
That is exactly what I was looking for. Thank you very much. I remembered the story and how moved you were by it. And
yeah,
you know, if it's possible in this town for 1,500 people, you know, it is possible in other small communities and other rural areas. Again, not only in Illinois, but elsewhere. So in 2020, middle of the pandemic, they opened Market on the Hill Grocery Store Co-op in Mount Pulaski. And it's a very small cooperative, but it has, if you can kind of see down in the picture on the lower side, the side with the coolers, all of that side is all local product. Everything is locally produced and brought, from their meats to their veggies to Funk's grains are in there. Grain are in there. So they really made it happen. And that was what was, again, so inspiring about seeing this community come together and rally around the idea of being in charge of where their food comes from and how they obtain it, and being responsible and, you know, keeping it within Mount Pulaski. So it's a really cool little, if you're ever downstate and you ever get to Mount Pulaski, I would definitely recommend popping in and going back to their deli. They offer deli sandwiches and soups and stuff too. Their soups are top notch, delicious. I get them every Tuesday. So what is FarmFED and what do we want to do, and how do we want to interact in this food system and really be able to hopefully, you know, institute some change and
actually, Cindy, can I interrupt with one other thing? Just to make the connection from that EPA grant to what we're talking about here, because there is like a flow through that happened there, which was that that community planning process that EPA initiated led to a few different specific ideas that they wanted to initiate. The first one that they pulled off at great speed was the cooperative grocery store that Cindy was just talking about. And I gotta tell you, that store is cute as hell. And it's super fun to shop in. It's just one big room. Sandwiches are great. I just want to advocate if you're ever coming through. Nice. Josh says so too in the comments. He was just there a couple days ago. So, but then the second thing was an idea for a food hub. there were also a few other things that have kind of morphed and changed or been put off or whatever. But the second and the biggest undertaking that was known that was going to take longer to initiate was a food hub. And that's how we get to this FarmFED Cooperative.
Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely right. I didn't forget that flow through. Yeah, so what they found whenever they got into the really reins of Market on the Hill was that they were having problems obtaining that local product or a variety of local product, and especially in the off season. Now, granted, Illinois has gotten so much better at being able to produce food pretty well year round, through high tunnel production and things along those lines. We are getting better and better every year at it, but you still tend to have that gap where it is really difficult to find, especially in that, area, in our area in Logan and Macon County, to find that accessible like leafy greens and stuff through January through like March. So that was kind of where the food hub idea, I believe, came from, and the conversation started. Was they really wanted to be able to source this stuff very locally and be able to offer it to their community residents. So FarmFED came in, and another, like I said, the problem with Illinois is we have this huge bounty in the middle of the summer where we have all these wonderful products and yumminess coming in from the fields, but we just don't have anywhere to be able to minimally process these products, to be able to use them during that little gap or those gaps in the wintertime whenever we're really craving some fresh sweet corn and we don't have, a field full of it or a refrigerator full of it. So the idea came about to start with a flash freezing process of some of that product, such as sweet corn, green beans, onions. We came up with like 5 products that we really thought would work well for not only co-op grocery stores, but for some schools and institutionalized service too. So schools, hospitals, nursing homes, things of that nature, because, that's something that I think we can all agree that we don't feed the people that need it the most the best food all the time. So, if we can come in as a local co-op and be able to make that offering and be able to help alleviate that problem a little bit, I think that's a very big function of who we want to be as well. So we will be, the distribution of the product. But the other really unique thing about FarmFED, I think, is as we developed our business plan and went through and did a lot of the research, we were finding that rentable cold storage and freezer space were going to be really important to our producers, because that's a pretty hefty financial undertaking for farms to be able to put those directly on, to be able to put any kind of cold storage, especially and freezer space. I have never heard of. Cold storage is usually in the form of reefers and things along those lines, but even that can be pretty costly for a farm to be able to start. So FarmFED also wants to be able to come in to support producers in that manner and be able to offer that rentable cold storage and freezer space to them. The sales team support is also something that I feel like is going to be a huge technical support to our producers. They can just bring us their product. We can either aggregate it and get rid of it as full product or, whole product, or it can be minimally processed and we're able to then distribute it to some of these institutions that we talked about. So it really hopefully alleviates some of that off of the farm's table, because I've worked on a couple of farms and I've been involved with a lot of farms for about the past 15 years. And it's amazing to me how whole that system is, like from the bottom all the way to the tops, like seed to fork, that those producers touch every single aspect of that. And whenever you're asking people to increase the capacity, you don't necessarily want to ask them to overextend themselves. So I think that sales team function is going to be really, really critical to being able to just come in and kind of take that off of their plate and just allow them to do what they do really well and they enjoy, which is grow and grow a lot, so that we're able to meet all of our needs and all of the needs of our communities and our surrounding communities. And we have been discussing, as we went through all of our landscape analysis and market studies and feasibility studies, we've discussed the creation of a nonprofit foundation to help support some of the producers in our area and in our region. And I'll dig into that just here, I think, in the next slide, to talk about some of the not so great information that we found out whenever our landscape analysis was conducted. But FarmFED has always strived to serve as a model. So we want to be very sharing and open and transparent with everything we do, so that we can get, ideally for me, like my pie in the sky dream is to see a farm fed, like scattered farm feds all throughout the state by the time we're all done. That'd be fantastic because, we do have a really long state, and moving food from the bottom to the top is really important. And having all of these small infrastructure pieces in place to do that is going to be critical to make it happen. So this all started officially in March of 2020, whenever the co-interim managers, and I believe Kyle Reed was a part of it as well. They came in and they received the money from Mount Pulaski EDPB to get the data gathered and get our business plan formed, is where it all started. Then they formed the interim board and the steering committee, and registered their cooperative with the state of Illinois. And in doing so, you have to come up with, what your mission and vision is. And there's just, I can't stress enough how much steering committees and like the interim board really put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this project and got us to the point. By the time I was hired, we were getting ready to start bringing in our permanent board, and they had already accomplished so much in such a short amount of time. It was really just baffling to me. They applied for the local foods, places, and program grant through the USDA. And then I was brought on again, and actually I wasn't even brought on till October. So that was a month after 2021. But Katie and Jeff had an amazing ownership drive. And this is the part that really hits it home for me. They had a goal of hitting $100,000 for shared pledges, or for shared pledged shares. And they exceeded that in, like, they were 4 weeks ahead of their deadline, even at $147,500. So they like really went to me, that just really showed what that community buy-in is, and how people do know that food can be an economic driver, and it can and needs to be treated as, the commodity and the important piece of the food system that it is. So to me, I just, that number's always just got me in the gut. It's really exciting, especially when you're talking about a community of 1,500 people, So the local food and places and program places, what was it?
Local food promotion program.
There we go. Local food promotion program. Jeff and Katie and people from the FoodWorks group came in and wrote this grant. And the grant objectives really just helped us focus on honing in on what our actual market area and landscape looked like, not only in the way of producers, but in the way of buyers too. They came in, it helped us create our brand and get all of our branding going, and all of our marketing materials, to be able to share with stakeholders what we're trying to do and who we're trying to be. And then it also helped us with some of the travel to get around to some of the different stakeholders in the state to discuss our project and how we could bring them into it. And it helped pay for part of my labor. So the total award was $189,000 with a $50,000 match. This is a really competitive grant, and it again tells me that we are on the right track. If the USDA was looking towards our project as being something that is needed, an infrastructure that is really important to our local food systems. The biggest thing that grant has done for us is paid for professionals to come in from FoodWorks Group, and they worked really closely with myself and other board members throughout the past year and a half to really drill down and figure out what is happening in Central Illinois and why we are losing specialty crop producers so quickly. One of the big things that I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So one of the biggest things that they did was they completed a comprehensive landscape analysis for us. And when that came back, we knew it wasn't going to be great, but the business plan was written pre-COVID, and the landscape analysis came back post-COVID. And what we found was that some of our anchor farms that were doing a lot of product and were bigger farms were gone, and they were not able to sustain themselves through COVID. And whenever we went to, kind of reach out and talk to some of those farms specifically, we heard twice that if you would have been open 3 years ago, we'd still be here. And that was kind of, heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching for us. But it also lit a fire under us, like, okay, we can't lose 2 more, 3 more, 4 more because we're not there. So there really has to be a path forward, and we have to figure out how to do it in a very mindful, meaningful way. So FoodWorks Group and I have worked together really closely over the past year and a half, weekly, month, or at least monthly meetings, sometimes sometimes weekly, depending on what was going on and what was happening. But they helped us to really figure out that our initial concept was going to be a little bit too big for what we had really thought was happening, and what was compared to what we thought was happening in our area with our specialty crop farmers as to what was actually taking place. So it was really helpful for them to come in and help us drill down that concept a little bit, and figure out the best way to come in to not only come in to be successful, but to be purposeful with what we're doing, and making sure that what we're actually doing is coming in to support all of these different people in the region that are trying to produce our food. Okay, so this is going to be a long one. The challenges that we have experienced to date. So we have been looking for an appropriate site for the facility in Mount Pulaski. We really have wanted to keep it in Mount Pulaski centrally, because it's where the idea was born. That's where all of the heart and the effort has kind of spurred from. And it's a fabulous community that's extremely supportive of what we're doing. Unfortunately, we've had two options there, neither of which ended up working out, just because of utility issues and water movement, or wastewater movement issues, and just things that were really beyond our control. The funding, that's been a big problem, is finding the right funding that's going to fit what we want to do. Because I will say, being a cooperative model has brought forth the funding challenge is real, being a co-op, because of the way we're structured. We have owners, we have shareholders, and so getting some of the guaranteed loans that are out there has been a little challenging so far, but we're hoping, as we move forward, things are going to change. But like I said, since our original business plan creation and COVID, we really experienced a loss down here at farms. Their inputs increased and their outputs decreased, and it just made for that perfect storm of just not being able to keep it going, unfortunately. So another challenge, funding, huge challenge. Funding is, I would say, at the top of our list of what we're doing, or what needs to happen, and where we need to go to make sure that all of this comes to fruition. And then ensuring that we're making the most responsible decisions for our shareholders. We have 162 shareholders, and there is a board of directors of 9 people that are in charge of making all of these decisions, and that are going through and weighing out all of the pros and cons of the different facilities and places that we're looking at. And that is a very daunting, challenging task sometimes. And it does really weigh heavily on your shoulders whenever you know that you have to consider their voice, and consider, what their needs are from this co-op, and from their basic fresh food needs. So, and again, funding, biggest challenge to date is funding. That's part of the reason that we've started this nonprofit conversation, obviously, is because producers need support. There's something happening in the middle of, or, in downstate, middle of the state, where our specialty crop producers are not getting the support that they need to remain operational. So FoodWorks Group, kind of discovered that in their process, and when they were doing that landscape analysis. I will also say that we have a lot of amazing nonprofits in Central Illinois that have just absolutely more than moved the needle on getting things like legislation changed, so that we can get some good, healthy food into schools, and moving forward on getting farmers the training that they need. And but there's still some sort of a gap that exists there, or else we wouldn't be losing farmers. So FoodWorks Group kind of suggested that we should look into either a partnership with a nonprofit in our area, or creating a nonprofit entity of our own, just for the support of our co-op producers. So what that would look like is offering monies and grants, funneling grants to our farmers or to our producers for GAP certifications, or to be able to get their produce handling certifications completed, whatever technical needs that they're unable to meet, offering boxes if they want to sell to us, but they don't necessarily have the money for the boxes, we could do a small grant for boxes for equipment, for things along those lines. That's kind of our hope and our initial thought. We're still at the very beginning stages of figuring out exactly how this works into our model and what that looks like. And to be honest, that is why we are here. We really want to drill down with you guys, all of the expertise in the room, as to how we can best serve the future of food with this nonprofit entity, and to be able to kind of figure out, is there, maybe we'll kind of get into it a little bit here with Jeff, but we really want some feedback, and we really need that, to hear your voice in all of this, and for you to let us know how we can do this nonprofit and to serve not only multicultural cooperatives and communities, but underserved populations. Access is such a big deal to me. Maybe there's a way that we could work with a food bank and be able to distribute some of our food through, the nonprofit works with the co-op and the food bank, and we're able to provide food in that manner. I think there's probably some sort of model like that out there, because I know there's a lot of really good folks in the nonprofit sector that are working on those things. So that's kind of why we're here, and what we're wanting to kind of ask your professional opinions of. And so thank you for listening. That's, like I said, just a real brief background of who FarmFED is. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if not, we're going to go ahead and get into kind of the chat and the discussion, roundtable discussion. And I think for the roundtable, if you want to put it into the chat, that would be fine. If you have a question or a suggestion, or if you just want to unmute and come out and chat, that would be wonderful too. So, Jeff, I will take it to you.
All right. Thanks, Cindy. Before we do this, I just wanted to add like 1.5 things to what Cindy was saying, which is just that I have said this before, and I will tell anyone who's trying to undertake this kind of project. We would not have been able to spend the time working on this. So when we started this project, at first it was me and another farmer in Mount Pulaski, Kyle Reed. And when he ran out of time because he was trying to farm full time, we wound up hiring my wife to work with me, and we were the interim co-managers that were mentioned. I just feel it's really important to note that we could not have made the time in our lives to do this if we weren't getting paid. And the point is that someone to do the ridiculous amount of work that it takes just to do the research and the writing and the communications and the fundraising and all that stuff, just to get started, someone has to get paid. And this wouldn't have happened if the Economic Development and Planning Board of Mount Pulaski hadn't stepped up. And also that wind energy company, Enel, that Cindy mentioned, hadn't stepped up and put faith in us and in the people of Mount Pulaski to put this project together. And also, what Cindy said was the best thing that came out of that local food promotion program grant was that we got to hire a FoodWorks group. And that is true, but also we got to hire Cindy and keep her on board. And I think it's really important to note that now she is our full-time salaried employee. She is absolutely invaluable. And we, and she also needs to get paid for her time. And she's been at this, putting up with all the highs and lows of this project over the past 2 years. And it's so critical that someone is dedicated to this, trying to do it. It's one of the things that we knew early on, and it only got reemphasized, that trying to do this with volunteer labor, no matter how well intentioned, just it's not going to get off the ground. It's just too much. It's just too much damn work. People need to be valued for their time. So I just want to say that. Okay, so this part where we're looking for your help. We're taking advantage of the platform we're being given to serve our own selfish needs. So we're at a point in our project where we have a lot of questions. We've done a lot of planning, a lot of development. We know what we want the FarmFED Cooperative to look like, what its operations should look like, but the details of where we're going to be, how we're going to get funded, and have sustained funding, And basically how we're going to take all this planning and make it real is a big question. And so we're planning on having a meeting with our whole board of directors. We meet monthly anyway. And it's important to note that our board of directors is a lot of us, me in particular, are learning how to be on a board while we're also trying to function as a board. And it's a learning curve. You know, I'm figuring it out, but it's worth noting. And so we're going to be having, in addition to our regular monthly board meeting, we're going to have a 3-hour or more, depending how it goes, planning meeting to try to figure out what we do next. We had planned to be in this one building, and then that didn't work out. We planned to be in this other building, and that didn't work out. And after 2 strikes, it's like, okay, we have to get the third swing, to use a baseball metaphor. So that's what we're planning on talking about on Saturday. And we're here asking you to dig into your own experience and your own expertise to, you know, help us figure this out. So a big part of what we're looking at, as Cindy mentioned, is forming a nonprofit. This is a question we had early on when we were starting this project, before we'd formed anything, is what kind of entity do we want to be? Is it an LLC? Is it a cooperative? Is it a nonprofit? Is it a hybrid of all these different things? And after talking to all the folks that were involved in the steering committee and to our community members and among our own interim board, we landed on forming a cooperative. And we're still happy with that decision for all the reasons we've talked about. I'm sorry, I was being told to slow down. Oh, why did I get so caffeinated? Ugh. Slow down, Jeff. Okay. We are happy with being a cooperative, but having nonprofit support means we have access to different kinds of funding. It means we can speak to a larger mission. It means that we can support not only our own work, but also the work of other projects in the area. And so we are pretty sure that forming a nonprofit is going to be of huge value to us. But what that looks like, or whether we're tied into another nonprofit, is the detail that we're trying to figure out. So we'd like to open this up to a discussion with all of you. And we have these prompt questions to keep us moving. So the first question we have for you is, what should be the basic values construct of our nonprofit? And by that we mean, we have our cooperative, we have a mission and a vision for the cooperative, but we're talking about something larger. And that works on more than just how do we get fresh produce to these entities. It's what's the larger mission and values of the nonprofit. And if this is too big of a question, if we don't get any response, we're happy to move on to the next question. But if anyone has any input on that question, we would love to hear it. What was being put in the chat while someone was adding a lot of links?
Yeah, there were a lot of really good links in there for USDA files, and I believe there was another one from MSU, and I saved those links, and those were from Marcia. Thank you. Maria, I'm sorry. Yeah, and some of these questions are a little bit lofty and may sound like we're asking you to write a report, but any kind of input and thoughts that you have on some of these things we really are stumped on, and it would be great to have any ideas like of what you think would be important to making sure that we're successful and able to make this really important impact.
Hello, can we just unmute and talk? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay with me.
So I feel like a lot of nonprofits that I see that do really well ask sort of what is needed, which it sounds like you all have done. sort of try to find, as you allude to in number 2, in terms of equity and inclusion, like gaps in what that community or food shed, or in conservation, that watershed needs. And so it's really interesting that in sort of rural Mount Pulaski, it might be different than the suburbs of Chicago where I am, which is definitely different from like the urban core of Chicago. So that's not a really specific answer, but that's sort of you guys have started on that, but that's a great lens to look at it through, I feel like.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go
Just
ahead.
building on what Jason said, I think that I have a question on like, it sounds like you're very knowledgeable of like talking about your earlier experiences of bringing people together from the community, and just kind of like, you have that information. Who are the people that were not in that room that are going to be impacted by the work that you want to do? And bring those people into a space where you can, I think all the questions that you had listed there are very much like questions that I'm not sure that like we can answer or provide a perspective from what we've seen in other places. But I think that the true driving force is going to come from those rooms with the people that were not part of those initial conversations, growers, eaters, institutions. In other practical terms, like your addressable market. Who are the people that you're going to be impacting through this work? I think that creating a session or a couple of sessions, you're thinking about partnering with like other great nonprofits in the area. I know that you Land Connection and I'm ISA, are good folks to figure out how to co-facilitate good conversations. It could be a breakfast or a lunch or a dinner, whatever it is. I think people convene around food, and I think that's a good incentive also in that sense. And so just thinking about like, I think those could be great places to harness that discussion, and being mindful of like, okay, who has confirmed, and like who needs to be here that hasn't been here, that could be a valuable voice to influence this work. So that's just building on the earlier comments.
Okay. An initial thought that is occurring to me that Cindy and I might need to work on before we have that larger meeting with our board on Saturday is really that we kind of know what a lot of our issues are, but it's been scattered across 3 years of work and development. And I don't know if we've really consolidated that all into like, here's the key issues that our nonprofit could help us solve that we clearly haven't been able to solve yet as a cooperative board. So like, Jason was talking about like, sort of talking about what are the issues that we're, what are the gaps that we're trying to fill. And I think we know what those are, but we don't have them specified yet. We've just seen the outcomes of those gaps. We haven't said out loud what those are necessarily. And actually, Eliana, you got to the question of you started getting to what are your favorite nonprofit organizations in Illinois. I am curious about more of that. You mentioned the Land Connection, which we are huge fans of. They actually often call me a bonus employee of the Land Connection because I do a lot of side work for them. But then also Illinois Stewardship Alliance is a great example. And our models that we'll look at. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a FoodWorks also, not the same FoodWorks that you do, but the one that's downstate that I think could be great to talk to and like understand what their convening methods have been in the past. I don't know if there's anybody, Jennifer or Wade, are here on the call, but and then in Chicago too, I know it's just different perspectives, just talking to those peers. And then I think one other thing that popped as I said that I know it's hard to convene those people in one room,
Mm.
but also asking like, some of those leaders in the community, like, who do you think voice hasn't been heard that should be heard? And then maybe creating, like, going to them as a resource. I know that's a time and people is a resource constraint, but like, if it's something that's really meaningful or that could be created in a meaningful way, I think that it's fundamental to like what, kind of is going to drive your work moving forward. From what I've seen.
Mhm. I appreciate this comment here that Gabby left for us. Values of community ownership and system reconfiguration. Why is this gap here in the first place? Why is food of substance considered a specialty crop, which is I want to say it's a hilarious question, but like, because it's such a good question. why are fruits and vegetables specialty when that's basic food? It's a really good question. It's turning an accepted term on its head, and I really appreciate that. And then the question that we're always asking ourselves: why, in one of the most fertile areas of the country, does this food desert exist? Yeah, that's a very valid fundamental question. But I appreciate that the idea of working those questions into the foundation of will be our nonprofit is of great value, because what I always find interesting about working here is that everyone's wondering that, actually, like, why is it that there's so little actual food grown here? And I think if we just put a point on that question and stop dancing around it, it might be to our benefit.
So I have a quick question too. So I noticed that some of the people in the room are from out of state. Michigan was the one that Michigan and Wisconsin kind of caught my attention, because I feel like you guys have got some really great food systems going on in your states. And if you have any thoughts or what your state has done to maybe change some of the, because legislation and laws and regulatory standards tend to be kind of some barriers for some of these things too. Is there anything in particular that your state that you could share that your state's done that's been successful that we might be able to, steal, for lack of a better word?
I can't do a comparison right now. This is Maria, by the way. I can't do a comparison between Michigan and Illinois because I don't know what the difference in the two states' policy. One thing I know that we do have is we have a food hub network. So we have several statewide networks: Food Policy Network, Food Hub Network, Farm to Institution Network, which all help food hub managers, food policy council directors get together and talk about, what they have, what they don't have, what they need, talk about mission, vision, share insight. But I'm saying this not knowing if Illinois as a state may already have that, because I haven't worked in Illinois specifically.
No, everything you just said is exactly why I said you guys have got your stuff together. No, as far as I know, and I speak very broadly, as far as I'm aware, there is not a food hub commission of any kind or collective group of people in the state, but that would be a great. Now, I will say that FoodWorks Group, the entity that the consultant entity that we have been working with, has been great in putting together an Illinois food collaborative system. So we meet once a month. We actually have a meeting next week, I think, and that's put a lot of people that wouldn't be in the same room together, kind of there in the same space to be able to share and observe and help each other out. So those are all really, really great things that I think Illinois could learn from Michigan. And so basically, there's not a system in place in my mind for specialty crop movement, especially in Illinois. So thank you very much, Maria. That was all super helpful.
Yes, and I will also link, since we just spoke about that, it was not only developed by MSU, it was developed, funded by the USDA, but MSU, Center for Regional Food Systems, where I just came from, I'm with the USDA now. But with CRFS, they put out the National Food Hub Survey starting in 2013. So I'll link the latest one because there's certainly good data, and there are case studies in there on, you know, high functioning best practices for food hubs. So it's just a bunch of great resources and information.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
I'm trying to respond to chat.
So I'd like to make one comment as maybe funder that's in the room. This is Lenore Beyer, and I work for, I manage our Foodland Opportunity grant making program around the region. And starting another nonprofit, I put up a lot of red flags around that. There's a lot of good groups already. If you could partner with them, going through a whole process to get nonprofit status is, you know, if you thought your first one was a lot, this will be a lot more, and it'll put it off for a long time. I think spreading the resources around to a lot of different nonprofits is not necessarily the way that funders will go, or private foundations in any way will go. So I put those things out there knowing that a lot of the food funders in the region are very familiar with ISA and the land connection already, doing great work. And so partnering versus starting up a whole nother structure with another board of directors and another piece of things, as opposed to adding in sort of a programmatic element that focuses on work in your area underneath that then could potentially be funded, might be a way to go and to talk about with your board.
Lenore, that matches extremely closely with some of the input that we've had. It's a super valid point. I've never been part of starting a nonprofit, but the folks on our board who have said almost verbatim what you just said. It's really valuable to hear it from someone else who's looking from the outside. And you're absolutely right that there are existing nonprofits whose mission is adjacent to what we're talking about. And I think it's a matter of, I think we honestly have a decent chance with the land connection, but it's a possibility that needs to be really gone into detail on to find out what that partnership would look like. But it's, yeah, I'm with you. Hey, there's your face.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that I think that would be the shortcut to get where you want to go, and to recognize that there are these different gaps. And if there was more, bringing that opportunity to an existing nonprofit might provide an opportunity for them to get a larger piece of funding as well, to cover not only what they're doing, but also add in a piece that you feel is missing.
Okay, thank you.
I think also what you bring is the food hub, the distribution, all those pieces that the nonprofits don't have. So becoming the technical assistance provider versus being involved in the infrastructure and development and production and distribution is something else. Looks like it. Okay, stop talking now.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much. I appreciated hearing that too. And yeah, that's definitely been on the mind of more than one of us, I'm sure.
Are we out of time? Is that what's happened? That poll came up.
No, you have about like 10 minutes, so just keep on going the discussion. I just put it up there so people are aware. But no, just continue engaging.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. So to two things that I think are relevant to bring up before I get to the comments that are in the chat. I should mention that over the past year, we've convened a new group, and this is counter to exactly what Lenore was just talking about, but it did present itself as a gap. is we've formed the Illinois Food System Collaborative and been meeting once a month. And the point of the collaborative is specifically to talk, to share, to do networking and sharing of resources between different entities throughout the state that are working to develop food system infrastructure specifically. So projects just like, so someone was mentioning a food hub network in a different state before. As far as we could tell, we weren't seeing such a network existing in the state. So we've been convening over the past year to try to grow that conversation and make sure that if we're working on something here in Central Illinois and we learn something and it could be valuable to a group in Northern or Southern Illinois or wherever, that other people have access to the things that we've learned so that people aren't having to constantly relearn and go through the same struggles that we have. And that's been a benefit to us too, to learn from other groups through that same collaborative. So if you're interested about learning more about that, feel free to write to me. That's the Illinois Food System Collaborative. And we can talk more about that. Alex chimed in. Alex is one of our board members who works for Midwest Foods. And she says, I wonder if it might be helpful to share a little bit about how the current business designation presents challenges and opportunities for traditional business funding versus nonprofit funding. Cindy, could you speak to that? Where did she go?
Gotta unmute, sorry. How the current, the one from a little bit how the current business designation presents challenges and opportunities for traditional business funding. Yes. So yeah, that was whenever we go out and start looking for any kind of funding, we're really finding out foundational support is only in the nonprofit genre. And we've gone and talked to a couple of different community foundations as well as community benefit programs at hospitals. And that was kind of what geared us in that nonprofit sort of way and in that nonprofit area and direction. But yeah, is that the question you were wanting me to answer, Jeff? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the one from Alex there.
Yeah. Yep. So that's the biggest thing that drove the conversation was the ability to obtain funding and be able to support our producers through this nonprofit. And again, I agree with what you said earlier, Laura, about the going ahead and partnering with one that already exists. I think that could be a better solution. It definitely is a less of an undertaking, but I also kind of still come back to there are still gaps that are existing. So I don't know. I'm kind of teeter-totter on that, to be honest.
Got just a couple more minutes. Are there other questions for us? Do we have questions for them, Cindy?
I think we asked a lot of questions of them already. Thank you guys so much for all of your participation and your encouragement and listening to us talk about what we want to see happen down here in Central Illinois and how we really hope to be able to help you guys and help the northern part just connect the entire state top to bottom is really what FarmFED is aiming to do. So thank you for your time and stopping in to chat with us and tell us your thoughts.
Catherine, I was typing the answer and then I realized I just could say it. Catherine Baker asked, do you take visitors in the Food System Collaborative? Yes, we do. We have monthly virtual calls and we'd be happy to have folks come and introduce themselves and talk about what they're working on. That really adds a lot of, that adds character and flavor to our conversations. It really helps to have new folks come in. I find constantly that, we're working on this project and there's people working on amazing, interesting things all over the state all the time. And I keep finding new people and I talk about this all the time. And there's always new things that I didn't catch. So yes, please do join us. Send me an email. I will put it right here. And I do love the chat. I especially love the chat in the written word. So always feel free to email me.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot
Yeah.
to put the contact screen up, but there you go.
Jason, send me an email and I'll get you on it. Catherine, same. Glad to hear your interest. We forgot to put a link for, can we put a link for the co-op on here?
Yeah, you had it in there at the very beginning of the chat, but it's FarmFEDcoop.com is the link to our website. Please go and check it out. And if you want to send us a message through there as well, we'd love to talk to you and get more involved.
Yep. Thank you for your input, everyone. It's very helpful. Just gets our gears turning for Saturday. We really need to have a productive conversation that day. So this really helps a lot get our heads on straight. Oh, and thank you to our interpreters. Sorry if we talk a little fast.
I am so sorry. I knew I'd be your nightmare, but thank you so much for hanging in there with us. You guys did absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff and Cindy and the interpreters. Thank you for like these meaningful conversations. And obviously we're keeping them ongoing, so everyone could still like connect. But thank you all. Just a reminder, this was recorded too. So if you ever want to like go back, we are gonna provide this whole recording for you as well as like the chat. Yeah, if you have any questions, let us know. And thank you again, Jeff and Cindy. So yes, we will continue on. And if you haven't had a chance to fill out the poll, please do. I'll keep it open for a couple more minutes. And yeah, let us know. Thank you.
Names from organizations and things are being thrown in a bunch. It's just hard to keep up the pace, but I appreciate you trying to slow down.
You guys are so brilliant, and I'm really inspired, and I really think that this information needs to be shared with the Latino community. But you guys speak way too quickly. It's just because I end up having to like summarize, and I missed so much.
Oh,
And
I'm so sorry.
no,
feel
I mean, it's
terrible.
not for me because I'm just an interpreter, but it's just because it's so inspiring, and I would love to, I would love just to see your work get out there more. I know it's like a whole different thing, but yeah, just too Speedy Gonzalez.
I was functionally fluent in Spanish at one point. That would have been really helpful to, if I still had that, but I haven't used it in so long. Damn it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and I
Thank
do
you for your
apologize at the
patience.
patient with me too, because I know I had a bit of trouble at the beginning. I was trying to let the second interpreter in, and somehow I changed it to Spanish completely. So I was like, I don't know what I'm doing.
No,
That's what
That is
happened.
okay. That's what
I
happened. I'm like,
appreciate it. It
uh-oh.
just the sooner that we can get any kind of information, for you to facilitate, so any kind of presentation flyer or things like that. When things like these happen, if you guys are gonna have videos, and the videos will need interpreting, those are also super hard for us, because a lot of video when it's edited is fast forwarded, so they usually will do it at like 1.25 times the speed. So having those tools, like I said, any kind of presentation, any kind of media that is going to be used is super helpful for us, because then we can kind of get familiar with the lingo and and with what happens, like I said, particularly when people throw acronyms or people throw proper names or names of organizations, like the EDPB or things like that, and then thankfully somebody asked, what does that mean, right? But then for the Spanish speaking public, all they heard was EDPD and have absolutely no idea what it means or what they do or who they are.
Yep.
So those are just kind of, that's just a little bit of feedback that we wanted to provide you.
Thank you, because not only was this my first virtual presentation, this is also my first presentation with interpretation of any kind.
Mine
So
too.
I really,
Oh, well,
really,
you guys
really
did
appreciate
great.
that guidance, because it is a totally new ball game and
Yeah.
it does change
Yeah.
the playing field a little bit. So thank you so much for
Yeah,
that.
no, of course, again, we appreciate it. It's just, and I know that, when you're doing a presentation, it's very easy to kind of forget because you speak things as they come, the thoughts come and stuff. But again, because it is also very expensive,
Mhm.
trying to relay the message to the speaking Spanish community in the best way possible is imperative, because then otherwise, if we're missing that much stuff, those that funding that just went into
Yeah.
into translating is not going to be
Gone.
worth. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. You guys did great.
Yes,
Okay.
everyone did great here. Thank you. And this is actually like good feedback for us too, as like the CIFPAC team to have. So that way
Yeah.
we take this in, and then that way for next year we could, make it even more better. So
Right.
yeah,
You
thank
guys
you
have
so
done
much.
great, Alex. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Have
you.
a great
Enjoy the
day. We'll
rest of
see
the
you later.
day.
Absolutely. You too.
Bye.
Bye.